Hi, my name is Allan Parker. I'm the president of the Justice Foundation, and I'm one of the co-presenters today with Tracy Reynolds from the Justice Foundation also. And we're both going to give you a little bit of background about ourselves before we get started with our presentation today, which is preventing forced abortion in a post-Dobbs era. And of course, you know that means after Roe v. Wade has been reversed. But just a little bit about myself. I am a former professor of law. I've been the president of the Justice Foundation for almost 30 years now, this year in 2023. And in the year 2000, we began to represent Norma McCorvey, who was the Roe of Roe v. Wade, and Sandra Cano, who was the Doe of Doe v. Bolton, in their legal efforts to reverse Roe v. Wade. And one of the things that the Lord told us to do in reversing Roe was to collect the testimonies of women hurt by abortion. And we called that project Operation Outcry. And many of you who do abortion recovery programs at your centers helped us to collect the testimonies of women hurt by abortion. And in the Dobbs case, because of your help and that of other ministries, we gave the Supreme Court of the United States 4,728 legally admissible testimonies of women injured by abortion. And over the years, we know, because the Supreme Court wrote in its opinions, that they heard those women's voices and they took what the women said. In fact, everything we know about forced abortion that we're going to talk about today, particularly for me, came from those women's testimonies. Everything I know about abortion comes from women who either were being pressured into having abortion and we were able to save them, or women who were pressured into having an abortion and they're telling us, unfortunately, their experience after it happened. So that project called Operation Outcry morphed into the Moral Outcry petition to ask the Supreme Court to reverse Roe v. Wade. And in the oral argument, they talked about two of our arguments, that one of which we're going to talk about today, the Safe Haven Law, that the Safe Haven Law eliminates the burden of parenting. And that's one of the reasons women get abortions, because they think, I can't take care of this baby, or I don't want to. And they worry about, what can I do with the child? It's not that they want to kill a baby in their womb. So that's a little bit about my background. I'll turn it over to Tracy to introduce herself.
Okay, so I'm Tracy Reynolds. It's wonderful to be here at this Heartbeat International Conference with all of you. And I've been involved as the training and communication manager for Center Against Forced Abortion since it began. And that's been about 12 years ago. And so we've reached out to thousands of pregnancy centers to do training on this. And it started out at a local pregnancy center in San Antonio, where we had a situation where somebody was being forced to have an abortion. And Allan got involved, which we'll talk about later. And so we developed all these tools that you're going to be seeing soon. And then my job is to continue to educate pregnancy centers about these tools. Many of you have used our tools, which is wonderful, but a lot of times there's a turnover in staff, whole new group that doesn't know about us. And since the Dobbs case, we have updated all of our tools and letters to reflect the change in the law. My background with the Justice Foundation started in 2005, and one of the other things I did was produce a TV show called Faces of Abortion, which ran on Sky Angel and other channels for 6 seasons. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Allan, and we are going to start our workshop of preventing forced abortion in a post-Roe era.
Yeah. So let's pull up the letter for pregnancy centers to give to pregnant women. All right, we have a number of legal tools today for you that you need to update the letters you may have received from us in the past. Because Dobbs has reversed Roe v. Wade, we've had to update the letters. But here's the most important thing you need to know. Forced abortion is illegal in every state in America, okay? A voluntary abortion is legal in some states if they haven't made all abortions illegal, but even in a state that protects abortion up to the moment of birth, involuntary abortion is illegal. So forced abortion, we also call that coerced abortion or unduly pressured abortion, is illegal. That's one of the big things you need to know. Now we're going to talk about the legal documents. We're going to talk about the three major ways that forced abortion occurs in America. These are the things you'll see most often. Number one is adult parents forcing a minor to abort the baby, their granddaughter, basically, or grandchild, depending on the sex. So the most common that you'll deal with in our experience is adult parents forcing a minor daughter to have an abortion. Number two that we'll talk about is the father of the child forcing a woman to abort his child. She may be perfectly happy that they're going to have a baby. She may be shocked when he tells her, we're not having this baby. You're going to take care of this problem. I don't care what I have to do. You're going to get an abortion. Begins pressuring and coercing her and forcing her. We'll talk about that. The third most common type in America is human trafficking or prostitution. We won't talk as much about that, is because basically you get into that situation, you should probably contact the anti-human trafficking division in your local area and tell them that you think you have a suspected coerced abortion from human trafficking, and the police need to get involved in that. But the other two, you and really anybody you train from this meeting, like your groups that go into high schools and stuff, anybody you train, these tools and knowledge will empower the women and you to help stop forced abortion. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tracy to talk about how you empower the woman, the first step.
Okay, so the first letter that we're introducing here is the Dear Client letter. And we actually partnered with Heartbeat International for this letter. And you can actually download it and put it on your own letterhead. In fact, we strongly recommend that you do that. So it's more personal, and you can give it to any client, because you don't necessarily know that they're going to be forced to have an abortion until they get home and they tell their parents. And so this letter can be, again, downloaded on your letterhead and make it more personal, and give it to the clients when they come in that are concerned that they might be pressured into having an abortion, or maybe they're not sure, but it's good to give it to them anyway. So the letter starts out very personally with, we know you've learned you're pregnant, you're scared, you feel alone, you're afraid to tell your boyfriend or your parents. We are here to help you. Then it kind of talks about what you do as a pregnancy center, which is we're here to counsel you. We're here to give you all your options so that you can make an informed decision. This is going to be one of the most important decisions you've made in your life, and we're here to help you. So then it talks about the fact that no one, no parent, guardian, boyfriend, can force, coerce, or unduly pressure a girl to have an abortion. It is her decision and her decision alone. And even though the Dobbs case reversed Roe v. Wade, whether abortion is legal or illegal, it is still illegal to force her to have an abortion. And so there are many resources that can help her, including the Justice Foundation, that can advise and help her assert her legal rights. So that's really important. And again, you're sharing with her all that information. We then get into some examples of coercion, which Allan will cover in the Dear Parent letter, and also the fact that she's responsible for the decision of making the decision after getting her options. And she's responsible to support her child, but her parents are responsible to support her. We then talk about some examples of this, and we'll go into those more later. And the main thing is to let her know that she's not alone. If she needs legal advice, she can contact you or the Justice Foundation, and then give her, of course, a copy of the Dear Parent letter and possibly the Dear Father of the Unborn Child letter. So again, this is meant to really explain to her her legal rights and that this is her decision. And again, no one can force or coerce or unduly pressure her to have an abortion.
Thank you, Tracy. So I want to say this, just a general disclaimer. What we're teaching you today is the general law of the nation. It's meant as general legal advice and not as specific legal advice, because specific situations may vary and specific state laws may vary. But we're very confident in the general statements that we're making today to you, and pregnancy centers all across the country have used these. All major pregnancy resource organizations have endorsed the letters, and it's been vetted and has worked very, very well. So this is good information that you're getting today, but I do need to give that general disclaimer. And in specific situations, you may want to call us, or you may want to contact a local lawyer, or we have national resource to find lawyers for you and the young lady we'll talk about later. But the second thing I want to say about this letter is, have you ever had someone who sees the sonogram or hears your counseling and maybe was doubtful at the first, but then they decide, I really want to keep this baby, and they leave? You make a follow-up appointment, but maybe they never show up again. You don't know it, but maybe someone in their sphere of influence started coercing them to have abortion because that person wasn't happy that they were pregnant. This is why we suggest you give it to everyone, because just this knowledge is empowering to the woman. And if she gets taken to an abortion clinic, she may speak up and say, this is illegal what you're doing. I don't agree to this abortion. I don't want this abortion. Knowledge is power, and you're empowering every woman you give it to. And so that's why we and Heartbeat recommend you put it on your letterhead, but give it to every woman and briefly explain it in the packet. Now let's go to the Dear Parent letter. All right, let's talk about the Dear Parent letter now. I'm going to explain the law most clearly on this letter, because the law is basically the same in all the letters that we're also going to talk to you about. They're just focused and directed to different people in this process of forced abortion. And so, as I said, the most common is the adult parent. But here at the letter at the top, it says, Dear Parent or other concerned person. It could be a grandparent or a guardian or custodian. It could be the boy's parents who are forcing the girl to have an abortion. And they're kind of pressuring her and forcing her. One of the ladies we represent was taken by the boy's parents to another city to get an abortion without her parents knowing about it. So no adult can pressure a minor girl to have an abortion. That's the law everywhere in the United States. So we start out with this Dear Parent letter, being conciliatory, expressing, if you get this letter, you now know your daughter's pregnant. It's not what you wanted, but you're not alone. Many families have gone through this situation, and there is hope and positive, healthy outcomes that can arise. And many organization groups, including the Justice Foundation and the organization that gave your daughter this letter, are there to help you. So it may be that you give this letter to the parents sometime. If the girl and her mother come into your office, you're going to want to let the parents know, or you may want to talk to the parents sometime if the girl's on the phone, or you may have the chance. And what we always presented is, we care about you. We don't want you to know that what you're doing, once you find out they're threatening to force the girl to have an abortion, that may be illegal and expose you to criminal liability or civil liability. So the second paragraph says, your daughter's now the mother of a child in the womb, gives her important new legal rights you should know about. Just as you were her mother or father before she was born, she's a mother now, regardless of the surrounding circumstances. So we're establishing, and I'm saying this to you, she is now a mother. She is a parent already under the lies of the law. And in this next paragraph, we're going to talk about one of her most fundamental rights. She has the fundamental constitutional right to direct the upbringing and education of her child. So upbringing means I'm going to raise my child. Right now, the child's in the womb. If she decides to give that child birth, that's her decision. And she's fulfilling her role as a parent at this time. Now, what are her parents? They've stepped into a new role, grandparent. So they're not responsible for their grandparent. They're only responsible for their legal child. And we suggest you use words like you're the grandparent now, so that they start realizing that they have a family relationship. Now, so we're talking to the parents, although you still have the legal duty to care, protect, and provide for her, meaning their daughter, she has the right to make decisions about the child in her womb, your grandchild. Under the general laws of the states, minors have the capacity and the legal right to consent to all Medicare related to the pregnancy, including prenatal care, delivery care, and postnatal care for her and her child. And we give two examples in here. One is New Mexico statute. And think about this. New Mexico is what you might call an extreme pro-abortion state. They protect it. And we actually started revising all our letters because New Mexico called us like week of Dobbs reversing Roe and said, are the letters still good? Is it still illegal to force a woman to have an abortion? So we've conducted extensive research. And yes, it is still illegal, even in a state like New Mexico, because of laws like this one. And then we cite Mississippi Code, giving the mother the right to consent to pregnancy-related care. This includes the decision to bear her child and not abort if that is her desire. So once you have the right to consent to something, that means you can say no. You can say yes or no. It's not just a right to say yes. And pretty much all the states have extended this right to prenatal care for pregnant teens. Now, it'd probably be a good idea for your clinic to check these laws in your state. It'd be good if you're talking to the police or Child Protective Services, if you can cite them particularly. And so if you have a lawyer that works with you, or if you just Google a little bit, it's not that hard to find the similar law in your state. Does a minor have the right to consent? And you may already know this because of your frequent practice in this area. But those are the important things she gets to decide. Now, because of Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health, all abortion is illegal in many states. If you're in the 13 or 14 states where all abortion is illegal, you just have to tell the parents, abortion is illegal in our state. You could be held liable criminally or whatever, and thus you know it's illegal in your state. But it's illegal in every state for you or anyone to force, coerce, or unduly pressure your daughter into having an abortion. Such action may result in civil liability and or criminal prosecution. It may not be a crime, but it's almost often civil liability if you force or coerce someone to do something against their will that results in severe damage to them. Okay, we also point out the vast majority of states have fetal homicide laws. At least 37 have fetal homicide laws that prohibit anyone, including relatives, from killing a baby in the womb when the mother of that child wants the baby to live. We cite a Virginia code and even a California penal code, where the California definition of murder includes a fetus if the fetus is being killed without the consent of the mother. So it's not a murder in California for the mother to have a voluntary abortion, but if somebody else packs her up and takes her down, parents could be guilty of kidnapping, for example, if they drag her down to force her to do something against her will. They could be guilty of aggravated assault if they jerk her by the hair and drag her in. But even if it's just, and I'm going to go through less grievous examples. So that's the law. And then the third paragraph, we tell the mother again. Now let's look at the examples on the back of this letter, or the second page of it, depending how you look at it. What are some common examples of force, coercion, or undue pressure? And these are what we've heard from women all over the country. Again, we have over 2,000 legally admissible testimonies from women who said they were unduly, or they were pressured or coerced into having abortion. Now, number one that we hear from minors, if you have this baby, I'm kicking you out of the house. Or the slide of verse would be, if you don't have an abortion, I'm kicking you out of the house. And this violates the duty of parental care in every state to care for their minor child until they reach the age of majority or they're emancipated. So you can't just kick your child out of the house and say, you go live on the streets because they've done something, particularly when it's their legal right to refuse an abortion. So that's the duty of neglect or abandonment. That would be the law in every state. Now, the second and third examples are sort of where they just sort of rely on parental authority to force the child to do something. Number two, no more talking. I'm taking you for an abortion. I've made the appointment. And we tell them, you can make the parenting decisions for her, their daughter, but not any decisions related to prenatal care, abortion, or birth of her child. Keeping the baby is her choice alone. Now, we did tell them, you don't have to take care of your grandchild. There are state assistance programs. Pretty much in every state, once you're a minor and pregnant, you qualify for maternal assistance. And as a pregnancy resource center, hopefully you're already aware of, or you should become aware of, all of those pregnancy-related resources that, for example, every state pays for prenatal care and delivery for low-income women. You need to tell her about how your state program works and how you can help her get enrolled in the state program to cover the cost of all these things. So for low-income families, that's the case. Next, number 3, you're my child. You'll do what I say. You will have this abortion. Or number 4, I'll beat you within an inch of your life. Or if you don't get this abortion, any threat or infliction of violence is unlawful. And number 5, punishments. You're grounded, cut off, stranded, or any other punishment if you don't get this abortion. That is infliction of coercion. One of the basic tests is, whose will is being done? Is it the girl's or is it her parents? Same thing with the man or anybody else coercing her. Whose will is being accomplished? I'll give you a quick example of this. The first time I really helped a woman, she was a minor. Her mother was forced her to have an abortion. She called us, asked for help. And we have to have the consent of somebody to go to court to help her. And she said, well, I think I can just talk my mom out of it. Thank you for your help. But she didn't sound very confident. So I went to the abortion clinic. She told me where her parents had made the appointment. Notice that. No more talking. I've taken you for an abortion. I've made the appointment. If there's an appointment made and she tells you about it, your time clock is very short. You've got to stop that abortion. If the girl says, I don't want it, this girl was telling me. So I went down there Saturday morning, had a lot of people praying for me. And I'd never done it before, but I stood out there, I make up a name, Jenny, to protect her identity. Jenny, is that you? 1 or 2 girls said no. Finally, the 3rd girl said, yes, Jenny, I'm the lawyer you've been talking to. Can I help you? And she said, I don't want this abortion, but I can't fight my mother. Well, whose will is that? And then her mother came out, or was right behind her, and said, who are you? And I said, ma'am, I'm the lawyer who's been talking to your daughter. I represent thousands of women hurt by abortion. I don't think you want your daughter hurt, and what you're doing is wrong. And she said, well, I don't care what you're doing. I ought to call the police. What are you doing here? Something angry like that. She grabbed her daughter by the arm and dragged her into the clinic. So this was the first time I'd done it. I called the police myself. I said, I think you're right. I think we should call the police. And she dragged her daughter in. I said, yes. I called the police, 911. I said, there's a forced abortion occurring here at this clinic. I gave the address because the girl said, I don't want this abortion, but I can't fight my mother. And the police came out. I said, I'll stay here. I'm a witness. And they came out. When they came up, I said, I'm the witness. There's the clinic. She said, I don't want the abortion, but I can't fight my mother. And they went in and the police stopped that abortion and they got child protective services in. So that's why we ended up, that's one of the reasons why we began collecting all these legal documents so you can do what I did.
And before we move from the Dear Parent letter, if possible, it's great if you can have the parents come in, and especially if you're doing an ultrasound, to actually see the ultrasound, because a lot of times, of course, they're angry, they're upset, but if they actually see the ultrasound, their grandchild, that can really help. And you also might get a chance to counsel the parent. Again, just like the Dear Client letter, it's important to give the girl a copy of the Dear Parent letter. This stops over 90% of the abortions. Once they calm down and they get a chance to read it and understand it's illegal, then a lot of times they'll back off. But again, if you can get them to come into the pregnancy center and also talk with them, that's great. And we've got several examples of that. Recently, a parent of the boyfriend and parent of the girl came into the pregnancy center with their kids. And the girl and the boyfriend were 16 years old. Both mothers were completely against her having the child. They wanted her to have an abortion, and they were united in that. And so the parents went into the ultrasound, they saw the baby, and then they were counseled in a separate room. Well, it turned out both of the boy and the girl's parents, in other words, the child's grandparents, had had abortions themselves when they were younger. And so they shared with the pregnancy center counselor that and burst into tears and talked about the situation. And then they were counseled about, you know what, if you force this couple to have an abortion, they may never speak to you again. They may run away, and they may do all the things that you're afraid of, which is dropping out of school rather than going to college, alienating themselves from the family, et cetera. And so this is a chance to really kind of talk to them about the psychological effects and the fact that they may be cutting off their own relationship with this couple. And so it turned out that both the mothers, the grandparents of the child, ended up saying, you know, we're not happy about this, but we will support you. And so there's so many examples like that. But again, if you get a chance to talk to the parents that are pressuring the girl, that's can be really helpful.
And of course, we're talking about legal realities here. This is not pro-life opinion. This is the law. So we recommend that if you teach in public high schools or some school, you give this Dear Parent letter to the teenagers in your circle of influence. No school should object to this. No one in America is for forced abortions except the oppressors. In other words, I'll give an example. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, condemned China for forced abortions. The current Biden administration has condemned China for forced abortion of the Uyghurs. So no one, even if you're very much in favor of voluntary abortion when it's the woman's choice, they don't like forced abortions. So the letter itself can save lives. And it's often the high school students who hear, hey, did you hear about Sally? She's pregnant. Yeah, and her father, her parents, her guardian, they're making her have an abortion. What? That's illegal. Get this letter to her, or they can call you again. So let them know. Knowledge is power. Most people don't know forced abortion is illegal in America. Now we're going to talk about the father of the unborn child letter. The law is basically the same. He can't do what the parents couldn't do. No one can force a woman to abort a child against her will. That's her right to make that decision. And if she is in a state where abortion is legal and she really wants an abortion, then no one can stop her. That's her right in certain states, obviously. If it's in a state where it's illegal, then she can be stopped. But as long as she maintains her will that she doesn't want the abortion, you can help her stop a forced abortion. Now, this letter is basically the same, and it tells him that he could be held criminally or legally liable. What's different about it are some of the examples. So let's go to the back of the letter where we talk about some of the common examples that men use. Number one, you won't get a penny of child support out of me. Well, that's his legal duty to support the child. It's not the woman making him do that. It's the law. So he's threatening an illegal action against the woman. And you have a legal duty to pay child support. We tell him that. Number two, if you don't have an abortion, I'm going to beat you up. We have cases from the news where men took a gun and said, we're going down to get that abortion. He may be an abuser already. Unfortunately, even in feminist women's literature, women are often abused because they get pregnant. The man, to be blunt, wants sexual access, not to be a father of a child. But he can't make the woman get an abortion. But I mentioned this one. If you are, well, I'll come back to that. If you don't have this abortion, I'm divorcing you. But I'll stay with you if you want to, if you'll abort the child. Often that's just a threat. Now, this would probably not be a crime. This is more the tort of emotional infliction or the infliction of emotional distress to force their will. Men have said things like, I'm going to commit suicide if you don't get an abortion. Or I'm going to report you to Child Protective Services because I know you do drugs and I'm going to get your kids taken away from you. These, my friends and I are going to beat you up. You'll never have a moment's peace. Threats like this are coercion, duress, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And sadly, many of you know that even if a woman has the abortion to stay with the man, very often it ends the relationship anyway. So I do want to mention something. So this letter can be given to the men, but I will say that here, if the letter doesn't stop it, you should be prepared to help a woman in this situation by getting her into a shelter for battered women, or working with your local shelters for battered women. You should know those names and be able to refer women there. And then if the man is abusive, then they deal with that more often than you do. And often they'll have resources for a safe haven type of situation for her. And you should contact the local police. Almost all police departments in America have been trained on domestic abuse. And this would be considered a domestic abuse situation. And threats and killing that child in 37 states is a homicide. So when you contact the police, and we're going to show you the Dear Police letter later, but if you just contact if it's this type, the man of the child, the baby in the womb, saying, I'm going to do something to you, it's good to contact the domestic abuse section of your local police department, whatever it is. And when you do, send them the Dear Police letter, send them this letter. All right. Facility director and to all staff involved in abortion provision. We call this the letter to the abortionist or the fax to the abortionist. Started out in fax days, and it may still be a good way to get the information to them. This is a very important piece of evidence and giving of consent that will protect the young woman or an adult woman. This can be any woman who's being forced. This is not particularly for minors, but again, that's a common situation. But even if she's an adult, this protects her and you, because it gives very strong evidence that it's a forced abortion situation, and she's giving you consent to do things that you might not otherwise do. So basically, this is going to be a letter to all the abortion facilities in your area. If you live on the border situation, where like on the Kansas, Missouri border or something, you need to know the names of all the abortion facilities wherever women in your area tend to go to get abortions or are taken to get abortions. So even in Texas, it's illegal to have abortion here, but if someone, and we've had this situation, women are still being forced to have abortions in Texas, and they're being threatened to taken to like New Mexico, where abortion is illegal. But you could, and I explain this, you can contact the police in both the jurisdiction where the girl is currently living or where you're located, and the jurisdiction where she may be taken to have an abortion. Because keep in mind, even if a voluntary abortion is legal in New Mexico or some state like that, involuntary abortion is illegal even in New Mexico. So what does this document say? To the abortion facility, that's the name of the clinic. I'm currently pregnant, and I'm aware that state and federal law allows me to obtain the reproductive health care which I determine to be my best interest. This is after you've explained her options to you, and she's telling you, I want to keep the baby, but so-and-so is forcing me to have an abortion. What do I do? And you can say, well, we can give the clinics notice that you don't want an abortion, and we can give other people, including the medical and police authorities and a lawyer for you, if we need to get you a lawyer, that you don't want an abortion. So what they're saying is, after having fully considered all my options, I've independently decided to continue my pregnancy to term. However, I'm being subjected to coercion by others, which is meant to compel me to terminate my pregnancy. This coercion may include, but is not limited to, threats, intimidation, force, or threats of force. I'm hereby giving you notice that if I'm brought into your facility, A, I will not be in the position to express my true wishes regarding my pregnancy. The guy's got a gun or he's been threatening to beat her up. She may not want to take him on at that time. It is against my will to terminate my pregnancy, and I may be accompanied by at least one other person whose objective is to prevent me from either withholding or withdrawing my consent for an abortion. Given these circumstances, I'll not be in a position to freely give legal consent for such a procedure. Should you perform an abortion on me, despite being informed of this fact, you may be subject to criminal prosecution and or civil liability for committing or conspiring to commit one or more of the following: And depending on the facts, it could be an aggravated assault, a wrongful death of the child, injury to a child, sexual assault, child abuse, kidnapping, fraud, misrepresentation, wrongful imprisonment, failure to report suspected child abuse, failure to inform informed consent, particularly for the doctor. If they get this, that stops almost 100% of the abortions unless they go to court somehow and the girl says, I've changed my mind. I do want the abortion. If she wants a voluntary abortion and it's legal in that state, she can get it. But right now she's saying, I don't want this abortion. Someone may be forcing me to have an abortion. And when you get her to sign it there on the line that says complainant signature, she's the complainant. She's complaining of a forced abortion. Then her printed name, date of birth, social security number, just so this ties it to all her medical records and where she lives. Now you're going to take this and email it or fax it to the abortion clinic. Faxing is good because you have a record that they got it. Emailing is good because it might be faster, but you've got to have the list prepared ahead of time for where you want to send this when it occurs. And then she's also giving consent because you're telling her you're going to send that to every abortion clinic or abortion provider to which she might get taken. And, like some of the ladies that particularly matter say, well, it's 10 o'clock Tuesday. Mom's told me that, but I don't know which abortion clinic it is. She didn't say. She just said, we're going to the abortion clinic. So that's why you have to send it to everybody. And number two, all law enforcement agencies. If this date has been chosen, then you've got a time crunch. And all state authorized child protective services. So you got the police and you got child protective services. And you may very well be a mandatory reporter of this child abuse in your states, or in almost every state, you'll at least be a privileged immune because you suspect child abuse. This is child abuse. And so you're going to be a reporter. And then the last consent is for the legal counsel representing the pregnancy center or their organization making these notifications. So we're going to talk a little about, this is why I say it's evidence. She may be in there and she tells you she wants to keep the baby, but particularly with minors, adults, you don't have this problem as much, but a minor may not have a card. She may never be able to come to your clinic again. If they say, we don't care what you do, we're taking away your cell phone. We're not letting you communicate with the boy or anybody else that's trying to help you. This is strong evidence and gives you the authority to call all these people, though even if she doesn't sign it and you just know about it, if it's a coerced abortion, you can still report to child abuse even without her consent because it's a crime. If there are crimes occurring, then that trumps confidentiality, but it's good to have this. It gives us evidence if we have to go to court on her behalf.
And this letter is being used more and more, especially now with in states where abortion is illegal. Parents are taking their minor daughter to another state. And so this letter is being used a lot more by pregnancy centers. So again, it's important to know, let's say if you're in Texas and there's no abortion facilities in Texas, but there are in New Mexico, you want to try to fax it or email it to as many in New Mexico as you can. And you also, of course, want the girl to take a copy of it, even if she puts it in her shoe, so that she can go to the abortion facility and have that copy, as well as hopefully they've received the fax or email saying that she's there against her will. And so we've seen lots of this, and the more it happens, the more there's ways to stop it. So recently we heard of a situation where parents took the girl to 6 different abortion facilities in that state to have an abortion. All of them had received the fax saying that she was there against her will. None of them would perform the abortion. So then the girl called the pregnancy center and said, I'm at the airport. My parents are taking me to California, where abortion is still legal. And so the pregnancy center said, call the police. So the girl called the police. Unfortunately, it was an enlightened police officer, and talked to them. And the police officer said, put your parents on the phone. Well, the gist was that they said, you know what, you really don't want to do this. And it's going to destroy your relationship. And you're kind of taking her out of state against her will. And so long story short, she had the baby, it was a baby girl. Grandparents couldn't believe that they were going to force her to have an abortion and, happily ever after. But that's why, parents can be just continue to go to one facility after the other until they finally realize, okay, this isn't working. So that's why it's really important to know in surrounding states, even if abortion is illegal in your state, where those abortion facilities are. So,
and we can all understand parents' anger and frustration. If I'm counseling young women and sometimes men, the father of the child, I tell them the parents have a right to be angry. You shouldn't be pregnant at this point. And but they don't have the right to force you to have an abortion, and two wrongs don't make a right. So we need to let the parents know. Now, I've mentioned that, so you're giving her the dear parent letter, you're telling her no one can force you to have an abortion. Tracy's right, you want to sign a copy of this and give it to her. And if she gives the letter to the abortion clinic, if she just knows, if she's taken somewhere and she goes in and says, I don't want this abortion. It's illegal what you're doing to me. I'm going to sue you if you do this. That stops, and that's the effect of this letter. It's telling them you're going to be on notice for at least a malpractice action, if nothing else, because you performed an abortion without consent, which is a battery in every state. That's why doctors always get the consent of the patient before they do a medical procedure. That's just standard law everywhere in America. So now we have the Dear School Counselor letter, and Tracy's going to talk about that.
all right. So this is a letter that goes to school counselors, medical professionals, and it starts out by saying this is important legal information for you to know to help you in your practice. Has a girl come into your office and ask for advice because she is pregnant? Well, here's some things that you need to know. It is illegal for parents, guardians, fathers of the child, or even school counselors and medical professionals to force, coerce, or unduly pressure her to have an abortion. Those are always those words that keep coming up. This is illegal. It's her decision. Parents cannot force her to have an abortion. It's important for you to know as school counselors and sharing with school counselors that most school counselors think, well, if the girl needs a procedure, they should be able to have it because after all, I'm her parent. And so in this case, the parents cannot force her against her will to have an abortion. That is unlawful in this circumstance. But again, school counselors, medical professionals say, well, if they're telling you to have an abortion, you should have an abortion just like any other medical procedure. Well, this is not the law in this case. Again, this is not any medical procedure. This is an abortion. So it is her choice about having the baby or not having the baby. So it is illegal to force, coerce, or unduly pressure a girl to have an abortion. And that's what medical professionals and counselors don't always know. And so we've had situations, which is why we developed this letter, where a girl goes in and the school counselor says, oh no, you have to do what your parents say. Not in this case. This is the part of the law that says that's not the case. It's her decision. And so we've been in a situation where pregnancy centers have had to fax this letter to school counselors, to the counselor, saying you're giving your girl or client wrong advice. This is a case where it's her decision and the parents can't force her. And in fact, you can help with the parents trying to explain to them if you get a chance to talk to them. And again, this letter gives examples from the Dear Parent letter and shows them how to get the Dear Parent letter, which again explains to the parents the law. So any government official that forces or coerces a girl to have an abortion may be subject to liability. This letter also talks about some of the criminal implications of the parents. And also, again, if they're a mandated reporter, which is a school counselor or medical professional, they should be, if they suspect any abuse on the part of the parents that are trying to coerce her to have an abortion, they need to report that, okay? So those are the basics about this letter. Again, most school counselors aren't aware of it, so it's good if you have any relationship with your local schools or colleges to make sure that they have this letter. And this letter also talks about resources for the girl, including pregnancy centers. Again, a lot of school counselors don't know about you. They confuse you with Planned Parenthood. And so this letter says there are pregnancy centers that will help her and will give her all her options. And so again, you can be the school counselor can be part of the education process for that girl. Then it goes on to talk about some of the ways that parents may think they're doing the right thing. She's not going to go to college if she has a baby, et cetera, but this can actually alienate the girl from her parents if they force her to have an abortion. So again, school counselors putting their counseling hat on, saying, you know, this girl, you may be afraid that she's not going to go to college, but after you force her to have an abortion, she may drop out of school. She may have substance abuse, suicidal thoughts, all the post-abortion syndrome areas that you know about at your pregnancy center. So this is important to have on hand and to be able to share with any relationship that you might have with schools and colleges in your area.
And let me emphasize that point. You should write a nice letter to all the school districts in your area saying what you do, explaining who you are, that you're a resource to them, to girls or women who get pregnant and don't know what to do or need help in the pregnancy or making the decision. And we have sent this letter to all of the school districts in the state of Texas. And it was kind of funny once because about 30 days later or so, we got a call from a school counselor who said, a girl's telling me that her mother is forcing her to have an abortion and she's sure she's going to do it because she did it to her older sister a year or two ago. So what do I do? And I started explaining it to her. And then she said, okay, that's what I thought. And she'd gotten our letter 30 days earlier or something, but she was just calling to make sure. She didn't realize she was calling the same people who gave her the letter. So counselors need to know this. Most of them don't know it's illegal for parents forcing a girl to have an abortion. So please tell them what you do, and they'll start referring people to you when they need help with that pregnancy resource issues. Also, send it to the police in your area, along with the Dear Police letter I'm going to talk about next, and your child protective services in your area, because they often think, and I'll give you an example. Recently, we had a case. It was a counselor for a child, a woman who was already an adult, but she was disabled and under the care of a guardian. And so the counselor, she got pregnant and she wanted to keep the baby. So who gets to make the decision in that case? And I worked with the counselor. We sent him this, and he worked in a state where it's actually illegal to have a forced abortion. And basically, if the woman has the capacity to make the same decision that a 14, 15, or 16-year-old girl can make, whether to keep her baby or not, if she has, enough capacity to make that kind of decision, then she should have the decision to make whether she keeps the child or not. Now, again, throughout all this thing, whether she allows the baby to be born, whether she places the child for adoption or chooses to parent that child, that's another decision that you can help her make, but that's her choice also. So it doesn't always mean that the minors keep their child. Often they'll place them for adoption if they're too young to take care of or parent a child. But I urge you, let your local schools and police know that you're out there, you're willing to help, and whether they want you to be involved or not, they need to know the law so you can say it to them in a nice way. So let's go to the Dear Police letter, since I've just mentioned that. And we've talked about notifying, when you're dealing with a forced abortion, it's possible homicide, the death of a human being. If it occurs against the woman's will, it's going to produce emotional trauma that can be devastating. It can destroy their relationship with their mother or guardian or parent, whoever's forcing them to have an abortion. This is very, very serious. If it's in the very early stages and you think the Dear Parent letter would be enough and there's really not coercion, sometimes the girl is just afraid, oh, my parents will kill me if they find out about it. Well, that the parents don't always threaten that or try to do it. Sometimes a Dear Parent letter is enough. But if you find out that you're being pressured, there's a time crunch, or if you have it reaches the stage where you have a duty to report it, send all of this legal information and factual information to whichever governmental authority you give it to. So this Dear Police letter tells them the law, because believe it or not, we've had police officers tell girls, They've run away because they're being forced to have an abortion. Police officer says, you got to go home. You got to do what your parents tell you to do. That's normally good advice for teenagers, but not in this circumstance. It's her choice. And if the government, say a school counselor has done that, you got to do what your parents tell them, or CPS or police, if a government official does it, this letter says they can be held liable for violating that mother's rights and using their authority. When they tell her, you got to do it, they're doing it with a badge and a gun and the authority of the estate behind them. So it can be extremely coercive. Well, a girl's going to say, I don't care what you say, I'm going to go find a lawyer. No. So they need to know what the law is, and they need to know they can be held liable for doing it. And you also need to tell them the evidence that you have. One of the things I want to say is keep text messages. Often what we've sent to the police is a text from a young girl. My mom's forcing me to have an abortion. Please help me. That's enough to start an investigation right there. You've got evidence in the girl's own words that it should be reported, and they should begin investigating and telling the parents they can't do this. So again, if you've had this, the letter to the abortionist involved, you should send that to the police or the school counselor or the Child Protective Services, because here's her own signature saying, I've had a forced abortion. They better take this seriously. The more evidence you have, the more serious they'll take it. But let me just say that your own statements are evidence. If all you have is that the girl has called you, this is what they've told you, you're reporting it, you report truthfully, factually, everything you've heard that makes you think or even suspect or reasonably believe that a crime is about to be committed of some kind. It could be child abuse or neglect, it could be fetal homicide, it could be kidnapping, but really you don't need to know the technical name of the crime, because forced abortion is illegal in all 50 states. So that's about all the law you really need to know. But if you're going to contact the police, give them these letters, because otherwise they may say, well, that's not our business, we're not going to do anything. If they get this, they'll call their supervisors, they'll get their lawyers involved. And everywhere this has been used so far, police departments say, okay, we're going to do something. The last thing I think we've got is our Dear Student letter. Tracy's going to talk about that.
So the Dear Student letter, a lot of you have relationships with local high school and colleges in your area. We've developed a relationship with Students for Life over the last couple of years. And so we developed this Dear Student letter. And also they have a website of their own called Standing With You that's on this letter as well. And so we work together. They have access to all our letters, like the Dear Parent letter, Dear Father letter, and again, this Dear Student letter, which you could certainly give, especially again, if you've got relationships on high school and college campuses. So this starts out very similar to the Dear Client letter, where it talks about, you learned you're pregnant, you're scared, you feel alone, you don't know what to do, this is an important decision, but you are not alone. There are resources that can help you. And then it talks about pregnancy centers. Again, most students don't have any idea what pregnancy centers are, even in this day and age. They get you confused with Planned Parenthood. And so this talks about local pregnancy centers. They'll counsel you, they'll give you all your options, they'll help you, they'll give you resources. And then it talks about, one of the resources is who we partner with, the Justice Foundation. And again, it says that it's unlawful, illegal to force, coerce, or unduly pressure her to have an abortion. Even with Dobbs, even though abortion is now illegal in many states and still legal in some states, it is still always illegal to force, pressure, or coerce her to have an abortion. So again, this is a great letter to make sure that that's available on those campuses, and also that they're aware of Students for Life and the Standing With You website. They get tons and tons of texts, and people call them, and they also will call us. And so speaking of calling us, if you're ever in a situation where you just don't know the answer, you've got the girl in your office, she's being pressured, maybe she's going to the abortion facility, please call us. And our information is, it's going to come up on your screen, but you can call and talk to anybody at the Justice Foundation. And our website is thejusticefoundation.org. Our phone number is 210-614-7123. and you can talk to Allan or anyone here and get advice. We also have a relationship with Alliance Defending Freedom, and Allan has trained those lawyers. And so if they're in a state where they need advice from them, that's also a possibility. So you have us as your resource, and we encourage you to call us if you have any questions or need anything. Of course, all of our services are free, and all of these letters are downloadable from our website.
Thank you, Tracy. And so the last topic we're going to cover is the safe haven law, which is an alternative to abortion in your state. How many of you have heard about it before, the safe haven law? But many times even pregnancy centers haven't heard about it. But we have used it in the moral outcry petition to reverse Roe v. Wade. Justice Amy Coney Barrett mentioned it in the Supreme Court argument in the Dobbs case that reversed Roe. She said, doesn't the safe haven law eliminate the burden of parenting? And the answer is yes, though the abortionist didn't admit that. And it was mentioned about in the oral argument and even written about in the opinion. So this is a national phenomena that you need to know about. What is the safe haven law? In all 50 states, there is a law called the safe haven law, under which a woman can be relieved of all burden of parenting a child without killing the child and without damaging herself with abortion-related trauma. Under the safe haven law, she can simply relinquish the child at a safe designated place, usually hospitals or fire stations or something like that, within a designated period of time, usually 3, 30, 60, or 90 days. She just drops the baby off and she's free. There's no cost, unlike abortion. So if you're talking about all of her options with her, which you should, one of the options is the safe haven law. She can keep the baby up till, say, I'm going to use Texas as an example, 60 days after birth. Now, after this training, you need to Google the safe haven law in your state and find out what the number of days and the places the child can be relinquished or dropped off that apply in your state. So you can give the women the particular information for your state, but this is the law everywhere. How do you explain it to the woman? Well, it's an additional option that she has, and it is definitely a better alternative than abortion. There's no possibility of abortion-related trauma if you don't have an abortion. And it's often, sometimes, a good way to eliminate her relationship with the father. Sometimes, as you know, women get abortions because they don't want to have anything to do with father. He may be a bad, abusive person, and they don't want to spend 18 years. Well, Safe Haven Relinquish eliminates all of her parental obligations, and she doesn't have to do anything. And yet I will say, if the father wants to adopt a child and the father goes through the paternity register in most states, and he comes forward and claims the child, he probably would be, and a background check shows that he's not a criminal or someone unfit to be a parent, he probably would be the best person to parent the child because it's his natural child. Another thing about it that's an advantage, it gives her the most time to make a decision. I'll use Texas as an example. She has up to 60 days after the birth. Maybe she's conflicted about it, doesn't know what to do. If she goes to an abortionist, what do they tell her? You have to make a decision quickly. Every day you wait, your risk goes up. But of course, if she comes in at the last minute, they'll say, oh, late-term abortion is perfectly safe. We'll be happy to do one for you. But they use that kind of pressure on her. That's a form of pressure, and I think misleading, because they always say it's safe up to the moment of birth. But if she doesn't know if she'll have a job at that time, she doesn't know how she'll feel about it, she can wait up until 60 days or whatever it is in your state. Some states it's as little as 3 days. Now, it's also free. You can tell her, you might have to come up with the money to pay for abortion now, but Safe Haven is free. It's equally available to the rich and the poor because it doesn't cost anything. It's the simplest way. I'm sure you're going to explain to her all the many helps for her to empower her, if she wants to keep the baby, to know that she can do it. That's the best option. We're only putting safe haven as the last option, but it is a legal option and it's her right to make this choice. But for example, you might suggest a traditional or open adoption to her, but that could be a lengthy and hard process. Safe haven, in a way, is a safe hands-off adoption. Just give the baby to the state. They'll take care of all the adoption. The woman doesn't have to go through a legal procedure. She doesn't have to have her parental rights terminated, nothing like that. So from some standpoints, it's the simplest for the woman and gives her the longest time to decide. Many women will choose to keep their babies, but that's their choice. And particularly if you're there helping them and they feel they're empowered to do it, that would be their choice. And no woman should have to have an abortion because she feels she can't take care of the baby. Again, you should be letting her know what is the big expenses. Women tell me it's mostly the medical bills when you're just pregnant, and then some clothing maybe as you grow larger. You can provide the clothing, and the state will provide low-income medical care for every low-income woman. You should know the law in your state and be able to tell her that. So that's kind of the basic thing that we've talked about. What do you need to remember? Forced abortion is illegal everywhere. How do you know if it's forced? Whose will is being accomplished? Are they using unlawful pressure techniques to get their will done and overcoming the will of the woman? That's a forced or coerced abortion. Tracy?
Yes, and we thank you so much for attending this session. We hope that this has been valuable information for you. For those who have used our services and have reached out to us, we thank you for continuing to use them. And for those who are new to this, we hope that you will take advantage of this training and all the letters and tools that we have available. And again, you can reach out to us to talk to us at any time if you need advice. And I've been on the front lines like you. I worked in pregnancy centers, and I just so admire all of you for your work, and you're on the front lines dealing with this. And so we just want to be there to support you and give you the tools to help you in your work. And so God bless you, and thank you so much for being part of this workshop.
And I want to say a thank you to, particularly to all of you who have abortion recovery programs and help us collect the testimonies of women hurt by abortion. What we know and learned has been partly because of your help, and we are continuing after abortion recovery. If you give our website to women, we're continuing to collect testimonies of women hurt by abortion to give them to courts or legislatures considering banning or restricting abortion. Why? Because like the women who give their testimonies, we don't want any more women to be hurt by abortion, and we don't want any more lives lost to this Holocaust. And I think we're going to see an abortion-free America someday. And it's partly, to a great extent, due to the efforts of groups like yours. Thank you very much.